Greetings, nerds. This is Scene and Nerd. I'm your host, Sarah Belmont, and with me, as always, is our Mr. Producer, Will Paul. How are you doing tonight, Will?
Doing very well, Sarah. How you doing this evening?
I'm doing fine.
That's good. That's good. Yeah, it's been another week of strong television, for at least for me, I think, with no secret from my Twitter feed how much I enjoyed Ahsoka this week versus last week, and yeah, and also One Piece. Yeah, so it's been some good stuff. Also,
Yeah.
yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, but also even beyond our things that we're covering tonight, I know the penultimate, I've been following Winnie Tom with, on HBO, the penultimate episode of it aired this past week, and it was a good episode too. It's been a very strong second season for that show. I'm hopeful it'll get renewed for a third.
Yeah. Was that the episode? I saw a bunch of tweets about Winning Time and a specific scene in it. Was that the episode that featured that scene, or am I thinking last week?
That was last week's. Yeah, that was when,
okay.
that was the prior. Yeah, so that was the episode where Pat Riley, the coach of the Lakers at the time, just really got in everybody's face to get them out of their funk, and then they just went on a tear, and had a pretty successful season. And then this season, so they did a time jump in this last episode from that to the third season to this season, and they start the year off and they lose the finals to the 76ers, and after they do another time jump where they get to the end of that season, and it's getting to that big the first showdown between the Lakers and the Celtics in the 80s.
Huh.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Great. Yeah. Great series. Like I said, I'm hopeful that it'll get renewed.
Yeah. Netflix dropped a new season of Selling Sunset. So it's one of those trashy reality TV shows that I just I end up binging these things because I just leave it on all day in the background. And I end up completing the entire season all in one day. It's amazing. So they dropped that. They also dropped the 5th season of Virgin River, which is not a reality show, but more of Hallmark. Think Hallmark Channel, TV show. It's very much like that. For whatever reason, I've watched all of the seasons. I couldn't though. I always struggle with Virgin River to get into it. So I've only watched 3 episodes, and then I binged, or I got really wrapped up into what was also dropped on Netflix this week, which was a K-drama called A Time Called You. I think that's what it is. And I'm mad at it because I spent 12 hours watching it.
Uh-huh.
And I think it was around episode 6 where I'm like, okay, I don't care about the main love thing going on here. I care about this other thing going on. And then I get why. It's not that it was poorly written. It just dealt a lot with time travel and a time loop situation. And I feel like there were some loopholes.
Okay.
And I don't think that the writers covered all of their bases to make it make sense about what happens. And honestly, I think it should have been a sad ending. It wasn't a sad ending. And I'm like, so no, someone should have got screwed over here because we got some very selfish people. I'm talking about the lovebirds. It should have been their sacrifice to make sure that everybody lived. So I'm not going to go into detail, but it got me sucked in enough where I'm like, no, I need to make sure I understand exactly how this all happened and everything. And there were some good twists. Like I said, it's not a bad written show. I just think that they cut corners and then they they basically showed you two people fall in love like twice. And I'm like, I've seen this. I know it's from a different perspective, but still, I've seen this. Moving on. So, yeah. So it was a decent week of TV. You're more hyped on it than I am. But before we get into Ahsoka, there is a little bit of Star Wars news. But yeah, Donald Glover's Star Wars Lando project is now going to be a movie instead of a Disney Plus series. Why do I have such deja vu?
Yeah, I thought Solo too. I thought about Solo, and so this news dropped today. Stephen Glover, who Donald's brother and co-writer for this film or project, was on a podcast, Publitory, podcast. Folks who listen to Dan Le Batard's familiar with him. But, he shared that they are going to be, instead of it being a Disney Plus, it's going to be a film whenever, obviously when everything gets back into production. And, I was like, didn't they learn their lesson from Solo?
This is, again, a movie that I don't think is ever going to actually get made.
Yeah.
This is a project that we've been hearing about I think, and I could be wrong, pre-COVID.
Yeah, because, I think it was like the late 2019 or maybe before where it was announced. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, Donald Glover could be also pulling a Rock and announcing something 10 years before we actually get it. And then when we actually get it, no one A, cares about it, and B, there's a reason why it took so long, and because of that, it wasn't worth the wait. So,
yeah.
I mean, I love Donald Glover, but this project, and we've talked about this before, like there is like this very interesting parallel with specifically DC and Star Wars, where they've done a lot of promising in the past, and then the delivery on that has somewhat diminished trust.
Exactly. And I mean, granted, Solo, I've watched it again, maybe in the last year or so, and it's not as bad as I remember. I mean, I liked it, if I recall, when we talked about it a few years ago. But at the same time, it definitely was when Lucasfilm had this and had this plan where it was going to churn out all these things. And then of course, after it failed at the box office due to various reasons, decided to go on a different path. But I guess for it to work, I'm just trying to figure out, like, okay, if you're going back to that time period, what would be the story that would be compelling for Lando, unless they are going to do it during the original trilogy period? Maybe, having a mission, maybe dig into like when he and Chewie were looking for Han after Han was frozen in carbonite after Empire Strikes Back or something like that. I mean, I think that would be maybe be an interesting story, but we saw pretty much all the key events as far as him losing the Falcon to Solo and everything in that movie. So I'm just trying to figure out now what's maybe other than him acquiring Cloud City, what else could they mine? No pun intended.
Right. Yeah. All right. Well, that leads us to Ahsoka, and Will, your Twitter caused me to go into this episode with very high expectations. Very high. And it wasn't just you. It was you and everyone else, because I kept thinking about how last week you told me, you're like, man, everyone was talking about that episode. And so when you sat down and watched it, you were like, what is everyone talking about? Yeah. I get what everyone's talking about with this episode 5, The Shadow Warrior. I understand it, and I understand why, in particular, Rebels fans are like, oh my God, this is my shit. But I watched it. It's not a bad episode. I just also didn't. I didn't walk away being utterly like shocked or moved or I was just like, okay, we're moving along. I get it. I liked all of the Anakin and Ahsoka stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I like that we ended up in a whale by the end of the episode. I don't know why. That was just pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, it felt like the episode, and I know we've been making some jokes about how these episodes are so short. This is the first one, and I know it was a longer episode, but this one felt long for me, where I'm like, hey, we're still here, and now we're still here. Can we move this along?
Yeah. See, I had the complete opposite. It felt cinematic in the sense as far as like, and to your, and if folks hadn't seen my Twitter, I used the Homelander perfect. So, yeah, so I'm sure whenever you saw that, you're like, oh, wow. Cause that was, compared to, as you mentioned, the last week, I was just like, what am I missing that other people are seeing with episode 4 that I'm missing versus why I felt episode 5 was so, where it did move me. Not only because it felt like a payoff for being someone who had watched the animated shows, but also as you noted, Anakin and Ahsoka's fights, for example. And yes, I mean, Hayden Christensen, I mean, clearly, I think he even saw somewhere where I don't know if it was true or not, where he jokes about, yeah, every now and then he'll like pick up a stick or whatever and pretend to do his lightsaber fights again. Because yes, I mean, the saber fights and everything, why it worked, it wasn't so much the saber fights itself. The thing that makes Star Wars lightsaber battles memorable is the emotion behind it. When we think back to Return of the Jedi, it was the emotion, granted it wasn't as much acrobatics and all the stuff that we, see now, and even in Empire Strikes Back and also in Revenge of the Sith, the commonality with all those epic lightsaber battles and even in Obi-Wan, why that episode sticks out was the emotions behind what was going on there. And so that was what was one of those through the things that helped pay off for me in this episode right out the get whenever Anakin gave Ahsoka the choice, live or die, and so that, so it was that. And then of course, as I noted, yes, it was a payoff for the lore. Last week we talked about, it would be nice to get a name drop from a legacy character, and we got one. And it was in a good context, because you called me out on like that about having like legacy characters show up and also I was appreciative of how to use Leia in this episode. Yeah. And then as for me as a Rebels fan, I've been looking for, even after we talked about this in our reviews, when are we going to hear Kanan's name? And we finally heard Kanan's name. And so I like the way you set things up, because so whenever you heard that, I mean, granted you're familiar with it because you listen to podcasts and all that stuff, but many live action fans only probably had the same reaction that Carson Teva had, which was like, okay. It didn't move them beyond like, oh, okay, cool. There's another Jedi. So what? But for me, I kid you not, whenever I heard Kanan's name, I literally threw my arms up in the air. I was like, yes, finally, we got it. So, I mean, those were the things that on the front end of the episode felt so perfect. And then as you know, on the back end, just again, when she's Ahsoka the White and the things that happen there, we could go into a little bit more detail, but those are the things, at least the top lines as far as why this episode really worked for me this week.
So, am I, for some reason, I had it in my mind that Freddie Prinze Jr. voiced Ezra. Is that not right?
No, No,
He voiced
he
Kanan.
voiced Kanan. Yeah.
Okay. Who voiced Ezra?
Oh gosh. I can't remember the actor's name right now, but it's not the same actor who's doing it in live action.
Right. I know
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And Sam Witwer voiced someone else, like two different people.
Yeah, he did in Rebels, he did Darth Maul.
Right.
And then in Clone Wars, he did you've probably heard a lot of people on the podcast, various podcasts talking about the Mortis, the three, the father, son, and the daughter, as far as the three archetypes for the Force. He did one of the voices there. I think the
Okay.
brother. Yeah.
Okay. I'm starting to piece together, and I can picture the face, but I don't know the name because I don't think he's a well-known actor. But yeah, okay. That makes a little bit more sense because I don't know. I was just, for some reason, everyone always talked about Ezra and Freddie Prinze.
Yeah.
and I'm sure I heard the name Kanan, but I was just like putting those two together. Well, okay, so where do you want to go with detail? Like
Yeah.
you're more geeking out about this episode than I am,
Yeah.
so you need to do a bit more of a leading here, bud.
Well, I think just go chronologically through the episode because I think it really, it does build. And it does from the moment when, where we end last week and then we start this week with Hera, Huang finding, Sabine's helmet and that moment where, again, getting back to, Huang been around the things that worked in episode 4 as far as like, telling them to stay together. And of course, when they go apart, bad things happen. And that's kind of funny, and I was thinking about that as watching the episode. It's like, well, come to think of it, way back when Obi-Wan and Anakin separated, things went bad, so this is the Padawan master sticking together thing, something that's a kind of a through line, through Star Wars. So, and also just, so that the depth of that moment of, him, the emotion there, looking at Sabine's helmet, knowing that, they don't know that, at that moment, they didn't know that she went willingly with Balin. She thought they thought both, and given that both of them were gone, Hera and Huang thought they were both captured and, taken off.
Dead. They thought they were both dead.
Yeah. Captured or dead. Yep. So, yeah. So, so I thought that was, so we get that. And then of course we do transition to I guess, there's been a lot of debate whether or not Ahsoka was in the world between worlds or was this all in her head? I kind of follow in it that I think they were in some part of the world between worlds.
Okay. Why?
Because I think Jason being able to hear the lightsabers and stuff I think since he's attuned to the Force, to me that makes it more likely that there was a portal somewhere on the Ceton or Cetos, I think is how they pronounce it in the show. And she fell, and Ahsoka found in that portal and fell into it. But, there was still enough of the gateway that was still open that, since he was attuned to the Force, he was able to hear her, and the lightsabers and stuff fighting in the background. So that's why I think, that was the case. And I think, Anakin was sort of, I think he was like partially was a part of the cosmic force. But he still had a link to the living force as far as being able to that you could still hear the lightsabers and stuff fighting whenever they were fighting. But so that's why I think that was the case in this particular situation and not necessarily her being stuck in the ocean. in her mind, and playing out there, her feelings of guilt and loss and things we've talked about before, with her leaving the order and leaving Anakin and having that guilt of like, if I had been there, maybe I could have prevented all this stuff from happening.
What is the timeline in terms of her leaving Anakin and him turning into Darth Vader?
So it was, that was the, right after the siege of Mandalore, the fight that was one of the things that she fell through in this episode. And that was, right at the beginning of Revenge of the Sith, because when Anakin notes that he didn't recognize that battle, it was because he was off trying to save the Chancellor, Palpatine, that we saw at the beginning of Revenge of the Sith.
So, okay, interesting. And this isn't the first time that we've heard, well, in live action, this isn't the first time we've heard about the Siege of Mandalore. Thinking about the same thing that they mentioned in Mandalorian, or is that a different?
So the one in Mandalorian is that's the different battle. That was where the Empire Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
Mandalorian's just always fighting, always fighing.
Yeah, but the Siege of Mandalore, so Darth Maul was actually, and the reason why, if you notice, Maul's horns were on the Mandalorian armor. He had, at that point, he had gotten control of the Darksaber. So he was actually, so that's why the Mandalorian armor had the Darth Maul horns on it, because he was in charge of the sect of the Mandalore, which, funny little thing is, those same horns are on and probably why people were like trying to make the armorer and the show Mandalorian, thinking, since she was she's a descendant of those, that the knights, I can't remember the name of the Mando sect, the Din Djarin sect. But that sect is sort of was the offshoot of the Darth Maul's people during his reign of Mandalore. So it was like all these things are like starting to connect in the Star Wars universe.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of Easter eggs.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. But the cool thing about the scenes with the, getting to when they were in the World Between Worlds, I mean, the very first one, was again a payoff for folks, from the Clone Wars show, because that was, and also Rebels as well, because they were on Ryloth, which is Hera's home planet. And there was the first battle, and was her, when he's like, I'm gonna teach you the lesson. And I love the way they framed that, where she, cause Ahsoka and Anakin at that moment, whenever, we saw them first together there in the World Between Worlds, skill wise, they're equal. And we saw that in the fight, and that's why Anakin was like, oh, you still have one more lesson to learn. And that's, and of course he takes her feet out from under her and she falls through. And then we first see when this shortly after they first met, and some of their first battles together there in the Clone Wars, there on Ryloth. And so, and I love that framing. I mean, with, whenever, he goes off, and, of course everybody's, seen the moment now where, with the Darth Vader and, in the smoke and all that kind of stuff. So it was, there was as I said, there was a lot of payoffs in this episode that I think really, if this were like the season finale, I'd be happy. I'd be like, okay, I'm good.
Yeah. Even though we didn't see,
we haven't seen Thrawn yet, but still, I would be like, okay, I'm good. I can, yeah. Because I mean, there were a lot of things in this episode that could easily have, if they, this is a 5 or 6 episode like show, you could have ended the season right here, and then have the next season 2 of Ahsoka being when they actually get to the next galaxy and stuff. But
yeah, can you imagine a 5 episode show?
Oh, I know, that would, yeah.
That'd be really weird. So what else? Anything else about the battles? between Anakin and Ahsoka?
I mean, the battles, really just, I think, get to the heart of her really getting over that guilt and really, and also like, the key line that, Anakin, one of the things he says, he notes like, you're me. I'm training you. You're part of a legacy. And, and I also think back to last week's episode with Balin when he's like, your legacy is one of death and destruction. And so now, so I think those battles were just really like, truly is the crucible with, Ahsoka going through this, seeing this period so that when we finally get to the moment there when they back into on the platform in the World Between Worlds and they had their last confrontation when, we hear the breathing of Vader and, after clearly he's, gone through the, chain transformation there due to his injuries from Mustafa and here, and they face off and she does, and then she does what Luke does. She's like, I'm not going to fight you. I'm just, she tosses the saber away and she finally learns that lesson and she finally feels that, all that guilt and everything is finally released. And so it really, I know a lot of folks were like, why is Rosario Dawson playing Ahsoka so somber and stiff and all that kind of stuff. But when you look at it now in full context, it's like, that was not only a director choice, but it was a story choice because you had to have that, her being, fearful of teaching Sabine, fearful of like, when we first see her refusing to teach Grogu, all the, she's so worried that that if she is going to be teaches someone, the only thing that she's learned how to be as far as a Jedi, has been a Jedi soldier. But, as we know, Jedi originally were peacekeepers and they weren't supposed to be soldiers, but were manipulated into becoming soldiers so that, so that Palpatine could, rise to take over the Republic. So, so when we do get all that and she finally, had that final confrontation with Anakin and she's like, I'm not going to, it's like Luke, I'm not going to strike you down. I'm just going to surrender. And they both like cool off and they're no longer, Anakin's looking like himself again. Ahsoka had the moment there where she did have the Sith, the yellow eyes, but then she backed off, when she came to and back into the normal world, or I guess back on the planet, granted, everybody's calling her Ahsoka the White, I think it was just a convenience, it was probably just like what was there, but I mean, visually it was just a visual thing to show like, okay, now lighter, but also if you notice how before everything was like very dark and dank in the filming, but then after she went through all that stuff, the lighting and everything in the episode was completely different and brighter and everything too. So from a cinematography standpoint, not only was her clothes different, but also her also the lighting and the sets and everything else as well. So, that was, I think, one of the cool things about this episode and why it just, again, for me, it just works super, super well.
Right. So she's completed her training.
Yeah.
Which releases all the guilt she had from leaving Anakin to begin with, as well as all of the imposter syndrome that I picked up on in the previous episodes.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. So that's why she didn't immediately start to curse out Sabine.
Yeah.
When she realized. I mean, I saw something in her eyes, but I'm just like, girl, you better control that anger because and then yes, I do want you to yell at Sabine at one point.
Yeah. Yeah. But she's like, cause now it's like, it's the whole balance and like all, that's why she was able to get contact the Purgle and do all those things and go in the well because so she's balanced now. And And it really, I think too, it's just like this series, it really is like when it's sort of like, it's different from Andor in a sense as far as just, some vibes and feelings. But as far as the way that they have really structured the story now that we're more than we're going to be on the back three. All the little things, all the little details from early on where she was like, speaking of where she was talking to Sabine about being balanced and stuff. I mean, in a lot of ways, she was just talking to herself. And as you saw some of those things in Sabine that, that she was trying to, like you said, she was like imposter syndrome and trying to deal with herself. So now that she's free of all that, she can hopefully, she's riding fully with the Force, and wherever it takes us, I'm good. I'm going with it as far as Ahsoka. And I guess we as the audience are on that same journey as well.
Yeah. Let's just hope Dave Filoni continues directing the rest of the episodes, because you seem to you seem to really be on board with the episodes that he directs.
Well, this is only, yeah. Well, I mean, he's written them all, but I think this particular episode, he needed to direct this episode because there is so much lore and so, it was digging so much into the animated universe. Well, not universe, but I mean, animated is part of the canon as well, but it was still, he was there and he knows that stuff inside and out that I think another director probably would have made a lot of different directing choices. And with the material. So I think it was important for Filoni to do this one. I don't know if he's directing any others this season. I have to look on look at IMDb, but I think this particular episode, he had to do this one. I don't think it would have had the same effect. And maybe that's that for example, last week's episode, it was good, but I think some of the things that from the lore standpoint that they were trying to get at, may have worked for you. It worked for you and cause you're primarily a live action watcher, but for someone like me who a little bit more, I guess, looked at it a little bit more critical, but given my understanding of some of the, from watching the animated stuff, it kind of left me like, it was good, but I didn't, it wasn't mind blowing like where this week I felt like I had to use the Homelander.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Yeah. And I did watch the episode and I like this episode. Like, I honestly feel the same way that I felt last week about both episodes.
Yeah.
And you're so much more passionate about this week's episode that I'm just like, Will's just going to talk and explain everything because I'm not going to do anything justice here. I don't know the lore that well. So, and because I felt like I talked a lot last week, I'm just like nothing surprised me. I wasn't like, oh, that's really interesting. I thought it was really clever. All of the subtle Anakin and Darth Vader thing that happened. Yeah, I don't know. I really feel like I'm at a disadvantage in this conversation. Well, not a disadvantage. That's not the right word. I'm not, the more I elaborate on this episode, the more of a disservice I'm doing to the lore.
Okay. Well,
I don't know if that makes any sense.
That makes total sense because I really don't know. I think that makes total sense because it's how I felt whenever we would talk about House of the Dragon. And since I didn't have all the lore and everything from Game of Thrones from where you watched it, it's the same type of dynamic, Yeah,
no. I mean, I think you liked it in your, man, I don't know. I'm not gonna, yeah. I guess why I would say yeah and no is because just because I watched Game of Thrones doesn't mean that, like, I never read any of the books. Right. I never did research online about it. So I only know the story that was, told through the show.
Mhm.
And as that is. So I would say I had a leg up, but I also didn't have like, um, I wasn't a book reader and a Game of Thrones watcher.
Got it. Yeah. Fair enough. Yeah.
So yeah, Ahsoka was good this week. Like,
Yeah.
there's nothing wrong with this episode. There's times when I really want to talk about something, and there's times when I'm like, I'm not that passionate about this, so I don't know,
Yeah. Fair enough.
what to
Yeah. Yeah.
say.
No, this was, yeah, and that's totally fine. Like I said, I think I was there with episode 4 last week where I was just like, um, yeah, you got
Yeah,
it.
but
Yeah.
I had a lot of say because there are times when you can feel passionate about something in a good way and passionately like this is where they fucked up.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we have 2 episodes of One Piece. The first one is The Man in the Straw Hat, which is basically Buggy's episode. I like this episode. I liked the twist with Buggy having also eaten his own devil's fruit. We learn more about devil's fruit and how what is the quote from it? The ocean will turn your back on you and the sea will take away your strength, which was the line said during one of the flashback scenes at the beginning of the episode. And then later on, we learn how the seawater Buggy used to make Luffy not as stretchy as he once was. What did you think about, what do you think is going on with Shanks? Because Shanks loses an arm in this episode.
I don't think, I mean, as far as like, do you think, I mean, Shanks, it seems they were, clearly he's very protective of Luffy. And they were going to clearly go off on the grand adventure to look for the One Piece. But as far as anything, I don't know if there's anything nefarious about him, but I think he's definitely like, there's definitely some more backstory there, as far as why he is so protective of Luffy beyond just, this kid who was just hanging around there at the bar.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I was talking more about the fact that when he saved Luffy, he did something.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then but his price was he lost an arm.
Hmm.
So I'm thinking it's not a devil's fruit.
Well, I mean, now he may have gotten the devil's fruit. He may have eaten the devil's fruit because, I mean, clearly he has some type of abilities because he was able to get the creature to stand down.
Right.
But
But that
maybe,
consequence like happened very abruptly.
yeah. But I mean, maybe that's just the devil's fruit has different ways of manifesting itself. So like
I
we
know.
don't, yeah. And I mean, Luffy, he definitely has, he has a stretchy ability. How far that could go, we could,
Well, yeah, that's what I'm getting at. We
yeah,
haven't seen a consequence for either Buggy or Luffy in using their powers because in
yeah,
this episode, the twist was Buggy ate a devil's fruit and so he's chop chop and
yeah.
then he gets cut down to size. I like that line.
I
That was
like,
a good line.
yeah, I like that too. Um, with Shanks, yeah, I don't know. I mean, yeah, I mean, or maybe he had maybe it was something other than devil's fruit. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It also is interesting how Buggy we learn new Shanks.
Mm,
And they go way, 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 way back. And
yeah,
I got an impression. Okay. Again, I know nothing about this.
same here.
Nothing about the story. Nothing.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to learn anything. I just want to watch the series and take it in for what it is.
Hmm.
But I got the impression based on Buggy's little like, yeah, I know him. I know the other pirate with the straw hat.
Yeah.
That it predates him even eating the chop chop fruit.
Yeah.
And so my mind thought, well, maybe because Buggy also I don't know. It's like maybe they ate a pear of fruit, because it's interesting how Buggy, you can slice and dice him any way and he's just in pieces, but he can pull himself back together.
Mhm.
While whatever it is that Shanks was able to do to get that creature to turn away, his consequences, he loses, like physically loses an arm. And who knows what else he has lost. So it's just, I don't know. Maybe it's not a devil's fruit, and maybe he just literally made a pact with the devil.
Yeah. Or maybe it's, like I said, not, like you, we're both going into this completely cold. So we have not watched a single minute of the 15 hours of the anime, not read any of the volumes of the books. So the manga. So I don't know. I mean, I really don't know, but you are onto something, that there is that clearly is, as referenced in the episode, they have a history. Shanks and Buggy have a history, and what that history is, I would think, given that Buggy was visited later by, Arlong,
Yeah.
that in the third episode, all, all these pirates have some common story where they've interacted with one another and double cross one another and other things like that. So maybe as we progress in the series, especially given that we got word today that the series, has been renewed, for a second season on Netflix. Got confirmation of that. We'll get more into some of the backstory with all these assorted characters.
Yeah. Now, with Arlong, I wasn't under the impression that I felt like Buggy knew who he was,
Mm-hmm.
but has never actually met him.
No, I got
Like
that
it was
impression.
more of a pirate, like I know the names of these guys and where they stand in the hierarchy and everything, the food chain, as Arlong would say. Um, but I liked that. I mean, to your point, that we're getting introduced to a lot of different pirates. And there's connections between the pirates themselves, between some of like Zoro and Nami, and even Luffy made a connection about a pirate who used to be on Shank's crew.
Yep.
So it's like this is a lived-in world, is
Yeah.
what I'm getting at, and so
Yeah.
they're doing a very good job about that. Um, yeah, and I just hope that not every pirate out there has eaten a devil's fruit. Because that might get a little bit old. I don't know. But I get that right now it's a new universe. You're trying to expand it, and you wanna show, you wanna have obstacles. So it's a clever MacGuffin, if you will,
Yeah.
to create those obstacles for our characters. Oh, also something with these two episodes that I wanted to ask you about was
Yeah.
your thoughts on the growing dynamic
Mhm.
between Admiral Garp and Kobe.
Yeah. That was something that definitely, with the two episodes, it really stood out to me, where, especially given Kobe's, I guess in episode 2, he, they're all starting to run together now. Did he like identify the Luffy and everyone in the second episode, or was it the third episode?
What do you mean identify Luffy?
As far as like, um, saying he knows the pirates
Oh, okay, okay,
who were
yeah,
that with the axe hand, got away from him. Uh,
yeah. So in the second episode, Garp comes to Shellstown and immediately realizes that Kobe knows more than he's letting on. And then also in the third episode, he's decided to take the crew because and like shank Axe Hand and be like, nope, you're no longer in charge of this. And so he took his Marines and they're now on their way to find Luffy and the crew. Yeah. And during that, Kobe shows how he's a new Marine cadet, but he knows his shit because he was taught by pirates. Right. And then they get to play Go. And so it's just, the more I think about this relationship that we're seeing, there's a parallel that's between Garp and Kobe and in present day, and how we are seeing Shanks kind of modeled what it was to be a good pirate to Luffy.
Yeah. There's definitely parallels there in the relationships and all. And also, and it goes back to Luffy and Cody's initial conversation about good pirate, bad pirate, and it's the same thing, good Marine, bad Marine. And so they're, again, as part of the world building that they're doing here, there's definitely setting up these dynamics between these characters and these parallels between the characters.
It makes the world more gray because you want to say, okay, well, this is a show, our main character is a pirate, so the Marines are the bad guys. And then they introduce Kobe, and Kobe's like, I want to be a Marine. I don't want to be, and then we're immediately shown why, like, the bad Marines, but Kobe wants to be the good Marine. And so I think he's seen in Garp, like, oh, okay, this is at the moment, trust me, I am suspicious of Garp.
Oh yeah.
But at the same time, he's not done anything he clearly knows his stuff. I think it just makes it a lot more gray because now it's not as black and white of saying, okay, if you're a Marine, you're automatically bad. If you're a pirate, you're automatically good, because we're seeing a mix of all of them. We still have yet to figure out what Nami is.
Especially when we see the end of episode 2 where she, like, whenever they are on their little ship and she calls someone who we don't know yet, but she, we know she's a navigator.
Well, we know she hates pirates.
And we know she hates pirates.
One thing that does frustrate me is Luffy has never really questioned Nami about why she was at Shellstone Town wanting to get to that map.
Right.
Like, Nami's been, it didn't caught me. I thought it was a good ending to episode 2. But I like how with Nami's arc, they're stretching. They're like, we're planting some seeds here, and there will be a twist here. But Nami's definitely has her own story.
She does. And
or her own arc.
Because especially, like, I think about one of the things that stood out for me with Nami in episode 2 was whenever she was able to escape and run out of the clown tent and gets into the town and see all the devastation that Buggy's pirates did. She realized, like, okay, I've got, even though we're a crew, but we're not a crew, I gotta work. I definitely need, work with Luffy and Zoro here, because if we don't stick together here, we're going to have the same fate that these poor people had, and become
Yeah.
basically the true captive audience that Buffy
Yeah.
has Buggy has, set up here.
Yeah. Granted, one of the clown henchmen literally went and grabbed her and pulled her back
Yeah,
in.
yeah, but it was more,
Very
it was the look on her face that was
Oh,
the
yeah.
realization was more. I mean, obviously they called her, but
Sure.
it was really it was the look it was that look like, oh shit.
Yeah. It's very similar to in episode 3 when she's talking with what's her face?
Kaya?
Kai.
Yeah.
Kaya. And they have that moment of girl talk in the bedroom.
Mm-hmm.
While the boys are getting semi-killed, drinking poison
Yeah.
unknowingly, and murders happening, and they're just in there chatting, just chat. But it is amazing. It's a very large building that they're in, castle that they're in.
Yeah.
But we see that, like, even though she's a thief, she's doing what she needs to do to survive.
Yeah.
And that's the best kind of thief, because that means that they're not doing it necessarily maliciously.
Mm-hmm.
But they do see she does notices when really bad things are going on. Like, she's suspicious of Carlo, not as suspicious as Zorro is, which Zorro is interesting because I like how he's being used more as, at least in these 2 episodes, we're seeing him as someone who is known and also knows others. Because in the second episode, he's told, like, you killed my brother and all of that, and I want your forgiveness, and I'm going to kill you. And then in this episode, he figures out what's really going on behind Kaya's back, and that she's actually been living with a whole pirate crew this whole time who are trying to snub her money out from under him. I did like Yusuf.
Yeah.
We get introduced in episode 3. I did like he's someone, again, another character I had to grow with, but I did like at the beginning the young kid running through town. Pirates are coming. And you're just like, oh, okay. So we see Yusuf. Clearly he's always wanted to be a pirate. And you don't get the payoff for that opening sequence until the very end of the episode.
Mm-hmm.
And it's in, now, my one criticism is his mom shouldn't have died in that scene. That was so abrupt. That was really bad. Yeah. But I did immediately, when they cut to the present day and he's like, no one believes me. And he looks up and sees Kobe. I was like, perfect.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm liking their use of, so far, how the writers are using an opening sequence, like a cold open, and then tying it somehow to an ending cliffhanger / reveal that makes you want to go on to see how this continues.
Yeah. I know one of the I think I saw where in the renewal notice about the show, some of the writers were from the Marvel Netflix shows.
Mm-hmm.
And so to your point, in particular, they were talking about how, adapting comics and manga, why this show is succeeding where other, like Cowboy Bebop, for example, did not succeed. I think part of it is the people know how to adapt the source material to do the thing that you just said, which is that cold open, great setup at the, that sets things up and you have that reveal at the end, but then we go to black and then you're just like, oh God, it's like, I gotta fight to it's like, I gotta sleep. I can't go to the next episode tonight because they do leave you wanting more and wanting to get that, hit the next part of the journey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I definitely,
I think,
um, oh, go ahead.
yeah, I will say, as far as the three episodes that we watched, I will say that, the third one, while I did enjoy it, it was, it was a tad predictable that the butler was going to was up to
Yeah.
no good.
Yeah.
But it didn't, but even that being said, it was still enjoyable because I think the writing and like that, and like you noted with Kaya and Nami having those conversations and really, getting to know through those conversations, for example, we get to know Nami a bit better, and also, and it was also just very fun with the dynamic with Usopp and Kaya, and really exploring their relationship, and how everybody was like, well, it was kind of like teenagers, like, are y'all a couple, or are you not? So, I couldn't help but start thinking like the shipping
Right.
dynamic that people may or may not have, what they may or may not have there. So those were the fun elements of the third episode that I thought, even though story beat wise, it was pretty obvious, but there's enough other things going on with the world building and exploring these characters that really made the episode work.
Yeah, I actually was gonna say that same thing, is that the third episode was the weakest so far, but that's also because the villain, like
Mm-hmm.
Buggy was such a cool
Yeah.
villain,
Yeah.
and we know we're gonna see more of him, that we went from like an overarching bad guy to bad guy of the week.
Yeah.
Granted, the one bit I did hear is that 4 and 5, or third and fourth episode, a lot of fans have this reaction, but wait until episode 5.
Okay.
Something big coming. And I like how it makes me feel, as much as like now my expectations have altered, but knowing that, but then again, like, okay, we're all on the same page. That wasn't the best, but it moved things forward enough.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we need a ship, okay? We need to get the ship to get
Mm-hmm.
going to where we need to be.
Yep.
Granted, now we got Kobe on the island, and it's a bit too soon, so we'll see how the maneuvering works, because we know that they're going to get away, but we don't know how and what else will happen in light of that, because Arlong is now teaming up with Buggy,
Yeah.
so that's something we got going on. It's gonna quickly come to a head as well. But yeah,
Yeah.
and you're so right. Like the cold opens, I was thinking about it the other day. Remind me so much of the Arrowverse, and a lot
Mm.
of the episodes where you would have a cold open that would either bring your attention to a brand new character who you're going to get to know for the episode, or bring your attention to like the villain of the week, or
Yeah.
some kind of hint as to what this overall episode will be about. And they're doing it in a very good way,
Yeah.
so far.
Yeah.
I like it.
I like it too.
All right. Well, on that note, Will, why don't you tell our listeners where they can find you?
Yes, you can find me on Twitter at Will M Polk, WILLMPOLK.
And you can find me at SJ Belmont, SJBELMONT. Please follow our crew on Twitter, now known as X, whatever, at Scene and Nerd. Friend us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and Threads at Scene_N_Nerd. And visit our website, www.sceneandnerdpodcast.com. But most importantly, rate, follow, and comment on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Good night, Geek Out. You're welcome.